Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Code. I'm Yitzi Hammer, your host, as always. And today I'm really excited to have Scott Thiel joining us. Scott is the CEO and founder of Tokinvest, a Dubai-based platform that's leading the charge in real-world asset tokenization. Think fractional ownership of things like real estate, art, racehorses, commodities, and more, all powered by blockchain, but built with serious regulatory muscle from day one. Scott's got this fascinating background, over 20 years as an award-winning lawyer, former global fintech co-chair at DLA Piper, one of the world's largest law firms, and he even helped shape part of Dubai's VARA virtual asset framework. Now he's channeling all that into making high-value investments accessible to way more people, not just the ultra-wealthy. Tokinvest snagged VARA's first multi-asset issuance license, closed a $3.2 million pre-seed round, and they're rolling out some pretty cool partnerships, like with the Dubai Racehorsing Club for tokenized racehorses, Maddox Gallery for art, and others. Look, we're in 2026. The RWA space is heating up fast, and Scott's right in the middle of it. I, for one, think RWAs are going to be one of the biggest and most lucrative future applications of blockchain technology. I know it's been really one of the hardest things to get over the fence from a regulatory standpoint, which kind of makes things more complex on the financial side as well. But once we do manage to crack that egg, it's going to open up a whole can of worms. And so I'm really grateful that people like Scott are taking the lead on this and getting through all the difficult regulatory hurdles to make this possible for a wider audience. So let's dive in. Scott, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time. Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzi Hammer, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Join us as we explore the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding AI, blockchain, and more. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game. Scott, thank you for joining me here on Beyond the Code today. I'm very grateful to have you. I know quite a bit about your background. I don't know if our audience know anything, so I'm gonna tell you what I know so far, and then I want you to just correct me on everything that I'm missing. Okay? So
Sounds good.
you're Australian initially. You spent quite a number of years in Hong Kong, and you're currently in Dubai. You're a lawyer originally, but a lawyer with a strong background in legal innovation. And at some point, you kind of migrated from being just a lawyer, quote unquote, to being an entrepreneur with a legal background. So did I get that right?
Yeah, that all sounds good. I think I like the phrase more than just a lawyer. I was always a frustrated techie turned lawyer, so this was kind of moving back into legal tech.
Okay, so take me like way back growing up in Australia, like what it was like, I guess, like getting into your legal career and how it kind of evolved over time. I know you spent like close to 15 years at DLA Piper in various leadership roles and in innovation roles. You even won a bunch of legal innovator of the year awards a few times. So tell me, like, kind of set me before we get into Tokinvest and everything you're doing now, what your legal career kind of looked like and how it evolved.
Yeah, it's you've reminded me of my entry into law at Melbourne University when I was standing in the faculty office of Melbourne University's law department, trying to convince them to let me do a joint degree in law and computer science, and literally being laughed at by the registrar. It seemed like just two completely opposite disciplines, and I was attempting to try and create a joint degree in both. And there really wasn't much of an option for doing that at the time. I ended up having to somewhat misrepresent two different faculties, so that I was actually studying in both without the other one knowing about me, back in the good old days of lower levels of data capture and, I guess, cross-checking across departments. So I had to sort of cobble my own degree together, I guess, early days. I do remember saying to the person in the office there was laughing at me, "Satellite litigation, it's going to be a thing." I can remember saying that line. So that was kind of, I always had a view on trying to combine my interest in tech and science generally with a legal career. And so once I then became a lawyer, and at the back end, I'm actually qualifying in law and science. And I actually wore my science colours to the graduation rather than my law colours to graduation, just to make a point, I think, at the time. But then as a lawyer, I was always interested in what was happening in the tech space. So I started practicing in about 1997, so last century as it is now, and some of the things that were happening at the time, Y2K, dot-com bubble, all of these kind of early things that were happening in the kind of legal sphere that were related to technology. And throughout my career, it was always what's happening next. Was it technology outsourcing, cloud services was a big transition as businesses started to migrate into decentralized, first generation decentralized infrastructure, which is how I refer to cloud computing. And so I've always been interested in that sort of confluence of law and tech. And throughout that time, I was always looking at how do I combine these things. So I built within DLA Piper, where ended up being a partner for many years across multiple, countries as well. I ended up, building, sort of contract automation tools. Even at university, I did a
Before that, but
case-based.
before you got to DLA in like 2008, what was your first law job? And how did you
So I
kind
was
of like,
training. I trained
how
at
did you balance your sciences background together with your legal career initially?
Yeah, so early doors, I guess I was always looking to work for technology companies. So some of my early client base were tech companies, if you like. They were some of the very early internet service providers. There was one in Australia called Australia Online, which was very very early. It doesn't exist anymore, I don't believe. But so looking to really service the technology industry was where I was trying to get interested in helping them out from a legal point of view, but keeping in touch with what was happening at the bleeding edge of different technology industries. I continued studying as well, again, in part to keep my hand in. I realized the undergraduate law degree only taught me so much, so I then did a master's of law. And if you look at what I was studying, it was things like intellectual property and security over intangible assets type regulatory issues, but it was very much geared towards how does the technology industry evolve? How does the challenges in the tech industry that maybe traditional legal structures were not necessarily supporting. How can we go and help build some of those new legal structures? I can remember at very early doors building a case-based reasoner where we used a neural network to effectively assess historic decisions that have been taken and revealing sort of unconscious bias in judicial decisions through sort of logic gates and stuff like this. So even going back very early doors, I was always this kind of how do I use this tech side of my brain and interest in that to try and do something in the law. It was obviously I was always looked at as something of a curiosity, I think, within the confines of a very large traditional law firm where I was based. But it was as far back as I look, it was always in me.
Were your employers frustrated or impressed?
I think mostly impressed. Obviously, I tended to gravitate towards those leaders in the firm that were supporting this type of thing. I think mostly impressed, and there were some
Because a lot
exceptions
of
to
times
that.
these law firms they just want to put you in a box. Like they're not
Yeah,
interested
yeah,
in you expressing yourself
yeah,
and so a lot of times I've kind of met frustration where I've tried to breed innovation.
yeah. Look, it's quite an interesting question. I think where they saw that I was just becoming industry aware and therefore helping them do what lawyers do, which is win work, deliver work, sell work to tech clients, because hey, here's a lawyer that understands what what my client needs, and my client sees them as somebody who understands their industry. I think they like that. But you're right. Actually, when I started trying to turn some of that innovation internally, that's where I met frustration. So when I would turn around and go, well, hey, we don't seem to be doing a very good job at gathering, even simple things like I can remember clashing with the global head of marketing because I'm like, why don't we not have a proper database of our credentials that is even readily searchable in a relatively, just logical traditional search basis? Like we're not using the power of computers to capture information, store information, and then regurgitate. So I can remember trying to
And they're like, if it's not
innovate.
broken, don't try and fix it.
Exactly, exactly. And I look at processes that are not efficient, and I just see the inefficiency in a way that I find a bit frustrating, and I think other people around me find it frustrating that I see these things. And then I try to change them, and I'm genuinely trying to change them for good because I'm like, we're wasting a lot of time. They've got teams of people doing very manual things. Wouldn't we be better if? But I think it was when I turned some of that sort of legal innovation internally. I think that's where I received most resistance because it started to shine lights on maybe people not running very efficient systems and processes. That's probably where I encountered the most resistance, particularly early on.
And then, like, were you able to push through that resistance, and then ultimately, those people who objected turned around and said, "You were right. We should have listened to you," or was it, or
No,
was it more kind of like the constant friction?
it was that's not your job. Um, we know we need to do this, but we'll be doing it, and we don't need you to get involved. In the main, there are a couple of exceptions to that, but yeah, it was an area where we would rather you didn't come in and so obviously point out things that could be better when we don't really want to hear that. It would be how I would describe it.
Okay, so you started off in Australia at some point, moved over to DLA Piper in Hong Kong initially, or you moved from, I
No,
don't know if they have offices in Australia or not, but
well,
how did
the
you
law
kind of
firm
move around the globe?
I did a hop through Anderson Legal, the Arthur Anderson law firm. So I spent a few years in that, and I'd left what was Phillips Fox in Australia, which is now DLA Piper. And then I moved to Arthur Anderson. And the reason I did that was they were a global law firm. Well, they were a law firm within a global, big accounting and auditing firm. And so I always wanted to be in an international platform. And way back then, there really weren't many of the Australian law firms were part of, international networks. That's obviously changed now, and a lot of them are, but back then there wasn't a lot of options. So I kind of joined Anderson's with a view to, moving around the world. And so I only did a year at Anderson's in Melbourne and then promptly moved to what was called Dundas and Wilson, but it was the Anderson Legal firm in Scotland in the UK. So I moved to Scotland about probably 4 years qualified, and then ended up doing 11 years in Glasgow of all places. Not the most obvious
Wow.
international placement, but I enjoyed it.
None of the Glasgow accent rubbed off on you?
No, but I can understand them now. So
Which is saying more than most of us.
exactly.
Okay, cool. So then spent 11 years in Glasgow and then moved to DLA Piper?
Yeah, 7 years into that journey. So I was obviously, I joined the Anderson's firm. Anderson's promptly collapsed post Enron scandal. So I found myself somewhat then the law firm I joined in Scotland, then sort of, it was an existing firm and it sidestepped out of the Anderson network. But I then found myself sort of marooned in a Scottish law firm, which was not the plan for being part of a global platform. And so I then did a sideways jump. And again, I mean, I'd like to think all of this was well thought through, but probably wasn't. It was like, who's got
The
an
long arm of the
international?
Lord.
Yeah, exactly. And there was some like looking around in Glasgow going, any law firms here on an international platform? And there was only two. There was Vincent Mason's and DLA Piper. And I went and spoke to both, and I ended up then moving across as the lateral partner to DLA in Scotland. So out of a choice of two, I found a home at one, and then was back into an international network again.
And then how did you start like moving and shaking things within the firm?
I would say pretty
Like
early
what
on,
practice area were you in initially?
it was tech. It was tech
Like
outsourcing. There was a
commercial,
load of
corporate, like M&A, like what like mainly what aspect?
it was it was more large outsourcing contracts, so technology outsourcing. So obviously Scotland's got a lot of banks in particular, so
Hmm.
the likes of RBS. I was doing a lot of work for Clydesdale Bank, even the bigger English banks, Lloyds and HSBC. We did a lot of work for those large financial institutions. It was predominantly technology outsourcing. So it was, that was early 2000s. It was all about outsourcing jobs to India for cost saving purposes. So I did a huge number of sort of mega outsourcing deals at that time, over that period, which was good because I learned a lot about sort of core technology, back office systems, how to structure these systems, how they all interoperate in the different silos to make a large business like a regulated financial institution work. But that was probably fairly just doing what a lawyer did, but as a tech lawyer during that phase in my career. That was through the 2000s.
And then
And then
this is your story,
uh,
Scott. I can't tell it for you.
sure. And then I wanted to, obviously the banking crisis happened, 2008 happened.
Uh-huh.
And what we had was a lot of those large organizations going through a period of distress. And it was a pretty down time. I mean, I can remember, RBS share price at the time hitting about 2 cents, which was, yeah, I mean, it was pretty dramatic economic times for the financial services sector. And while that created some opportunity for lawyers, particularly restructuring lawyers and the like, it wasn't. If I looked around, the sort of innovation and building the future wasn't happening in Scotland at that point in
Shocking.
time. In fact, yeah, I know, shocking, but also more than anything, there wasn't even the sort of core work that I had been doing was starting to dry up, and it was all just about cost savings to a certain extent. But then it was firefighting. Just how do we save the businesses and the forced amalgamations and mergers and things that came out of the banking crisis. So at that time, it was an opportunity came up within DLA to move to the Hong Kong office. I didn't really know much about Hong Kong. Again, like all good plans, I'd never really been there, didn't really know anything. So I just took the job to move as a lateral partner. The existing sort of IPT group that had been in DLA Hong Kong had all left en masse to another law firm. So it was kind of a greenfield site. And they needed people to come in and rebuild that practice area for Asia. So it was a huge opportunity to move to, a global city. I didn't know much about Hong Kong, but it sounded like it might be a little bit more cosmopolitan than Glasgow, with a little bit more going on. So I took the opportunity and moved over there. That was 2011, and it was a great time. Like Hong Kong was a fun city at that time. There was a lot happening with the growth of the Chinese tech companies. I didn't know much about China at all at the time, other than what Western media tells you, which, as always, is usually pretty off the mark and tainted with views that suit national agendas rather than necessarily the truth. And so I got to Hong Kong and then rapidly got involved in the big Chinese tech companies, the Alibabas, Baidu's, Tencent's, JD.com, like all these unbelievable technology companies, which I'd sort of heard of. But, I started traveling to the mainland and you would go up there and the level of, it was like China's not emerging. It's, I remember flying my first time into Shanghai.
Emerged.
I mean,
Yeah.
beyond emerged. Oh, right, the future's here, and you've already built it, guys. Well done. This is going to be fun. And so, spending time at like
How much of
Alibaba's,
this was you just kind of like figuring shit out on your own, right? Like you
yeah,
said, like you just kind of landed here, this whole team disappeared. You didn't know anything about the region. You didn't know much
yeah.
about the city. So how much of this was you just kind of like trying to learn the lay of the land on your own, and how much were you getting some kind of guidance from higher ups within the firm?
All right, I'm going to tell a story. I was told that I would arrive and I'd be marched around and introduced to all of the general counsels and the amazing client base they had, and be given this soft landing and lots of clients and relationships to look after. Then there was the truth, which was exactly what you first said. I arrived. There was no help. There was no support. It was eat what you kill. I hadn't killed anything yet. I didn't know. I can remember some of my very early phone calls trying to pretend I knew about Chinese law, right, which is pretty different to the common law environments I'd worked in. So it was absolutely deep end, sink or swim. There wasn't a lot of support. There wasn't an institutional client base that I could, simply move into and start servicing my area of work for, large panel firm clients. Like some law firms are built that way. DLA in Asia certainly was not. So it was very much find what you could do. Now, some of my really core skills like technology outsourcing didn't exist. Well, they did exist, but you'd go and talk to a bank. I won't name the names here, but there was one bank in the UK, a very well-known bank, and you would, do a big outsourcing deal for them. It would be 6 to 12 months of work. It'd be $300,000 to $500,000 worth of legal fees. It'd be a 1,000-page contract. It was a big project to work on and do thoroughly. The bank with the same name in Hong Kong for the same sort of deal, when I went and knocked on their door as a new guy in town, said, yeah, we need that done in 2 weeks. You can have $15,000. That's what we pay for these things. I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. That's
Right. This
and
is a whole
it
new
was a real
language.
yeah, and it was also this moment I realized that different legal markets will pay for legal services and have a view on what it's worth and how rigorous it needs to be. And they're very different from one country to the next. And so I'm sitting there going,
Do
well,
you
I am
think
the
that that's
world's,
like reflective of the litigatory frameworks in those areas? Like, is somebody in Hong Kong saying like we could just do this quick and dirty because the chance of it ending up in court later are less than in Scotland, or is it for other reasons?
I
Like
would
ultimately,
say,
it's like a
if,
we want to do business
yeah,
factor,
yeah, no,
and then
I
like
would
how fast
say,
can we do this business without getting screwed?
I think the US client, I mean, you must know this, the US clients are used to paying for lawyers. And I think they're used to pay for lawyers because they fear the back end litigation threat. So actually, exactly what I did was sitting in Hong Kong and realizing the local clients there. Was it because there was no real threat of litigation, or was it just because they'd never seen it done? They didn't know this is how you were supposed to do it. And I think there was a bit more of that. But the reality for me was I suddenly went, I'm going to go and target the US clients doing business in China. And that's exactly what I did. So I went and started winning clients and work for the likes of Salesforce, Adobe, some of the big tech players out of the West Coast who were then doing joint ventures and market entry deals into mainland China. This huge market, but with obviously lots and lots of complexity around US-China relations and the rise of data privacy law and the weaponization of those laws that was happening in the early sort of 2010 to 2015 in particular. And so that's what I did is I pivoted to where are the people prepared to pay for my skills? It isn't local clients. It's US clients in particular looking at tapping into the very large China market with all of the complexity that comes with that. So, I think that's what I did in a way. And then I also did a little bit of work for Chinese companies. I was just blown away by my site visits in mainland China. Like I had the privilege of spending time at Alibaba's headquarters in Hangzhou. I went and HK DJI, who make all of the drone technology out of China. Spending time
Yeah.
in their environment. HK Vision that do a lot of they do a lot of CCTV type stuff and also other retail
Hmm.
products and some of the technology that was going on in there that was just normal. Um, I'd never seen before. I remember going to some of these places and them knowing we were arriving because they'd been tracking us from when we walked out of our hotel. Because not out of a badness kind of a way. It was just, oh, we knew
It's
you were
just the way they
coming and
do
we were
things.
keeping. It's just the way the city brain works in Hangzhou. It tracks everybody all the time, and there
Wow.
is no expectation of privacy on the street, but actually everyone's pretty comfortable with that because there's an expectation of security that comes along with that level of scrutiny. Completely different philosophies of existence. Whereas, as a tech data lawyer in Hong Kong, people were talking about things like privacy rights as being a privacy right for individual citizens. That's not how privacy works in some other markets. So it was fascinating from a kind of a social, cultural point of view. But then being inside these organizations, I worked with Alipay. I helped with the Alipay expansion deal out of China, first into Hong Kong and then other parts of the world. And everyone's like trying to copy things. And they weren't copying things. They had built the best super app. Tencent's the best super app in the world, still is. Alibaba, the best e-wallet in the world, and it was the first back in those days. So suddenly I'm working for these Chinese companies that I'd barely heard of who had real consumer driven solutions that had been road tested on 100 million sort of population bases in mainland being brought out to the world. And that was super fascinating compared to, say, working in the more mature markets of Australia and the UK, which were sort of business as usual and doing a robust job of lawyering, more rigor around contracting, but not actually not actually supporting necessarily a lot of innovative stuff. So I found it fascinating working in that Greater China environment.
Yeah, I'm sure. And it must have been also just fascinating from like a personal career perspective. Like you learned how to drum up business in a
Yeah,
new market. You learned, and also
yeah.
also from a sciences background perspective, like you were probably being exposed to all these new, you're at the forefront of these new evolving technologies. Is that
Yeah.
kind of how you segued into crypto?
A little bit. So crypto was, um, it was just the next evolution of another type of technology that I was interested in. And throughout this journey, we'd built an outsource, a thing called the contract dashboard, which was an outsourcing tech solution where you automatically, it sort of scored how good your contract was. And we built contract automation tools to try and automate the generation of contracts. But when blockchain emerged, I really got involved in it around the kind of ICO boom of 2017. And I can remember hosting like ICO events in DLA's offices in Hong Kong, and a typical law firm event. No disrespect, but most law firm events, you'd get 100 registrations, 50 would turn up, 20 wouldn't be asleep, during the event, because it's lawyers talking about law. It's
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
but it's only so interesting. The ICO events, 100 would register, 400 would turn up. The law firm was having a meltdown. They drank the place dry. Deals were being done in corridors. It was just this incredible energy around that ecosystem. And that was probably 2017. And these were some of the most exciting, if slightly out of control, events I'd ever seen in a law firm environment. Like literally people having to be sort of moved on at the end of nights and stuff, which just isn't the way that the normal law firm event used to work. But for me, the underlying tech was fascinating. I was, a senior partner in a global law firm, but there's an anarchist inside me. There's a kind of a real socialist vibe to my kind of outlook on life, and the sort of decentralization elements of blockchain technology and the ability for it to put more power and more opportunity back into the hands of everybody is kind of philosophically got me interested. The technology I found super interesting as well. I am a computer science and maths graduate, and so I went and learned a lot about some of the cryptography and the underlying consensus algorithms. I went and did the Oxford blockchain course, and then I convinced DLA Piper to join Federa Hashgraph. So it's a layer one protocol operating out of the US. We joined as founding governing council members. I mean, I managed to convince DLA Piper to be running a validator node on a blockchain as early as 2018. I don't know if they fully understood what I've got them signed up for, but there we go. We managed to do it. And that was a super interesting part of, it was a bit of a side gig to being a lawyer. But Hedera asked me to join their board. I was a governing council rep. I spent probably about 6 years on their board. That was super interesting. So to being inside a layer one protocol as a board member and representative of a council member, learning about the realities of these brand new next generation decentralized supercomputers, what could be done, what were the aspects of them, how they operated internally, obviously all the regulatory stuff that goes around. Are they legal? Are their cryptos really securities? Was it an illegal offering? You got the reign of terror on the industry, which was Gary Gensler's time at the head of the SEC. And I'm sitting on a board of a major blockchain in the US. So it was a super interesting time for learning about the evolution of that technology and the battle between regulators and TradFi versus this kind of less regulated, particularly permissionless DeFi type ecosystem.
Yeah.
So that was really,
So, and
really interesting.
it sounds like that, I'm envious of the opportunity that you had there. It sounds like you had a really good time. Like what, and you don't have to answer if this is too, if this is a sensitive question, but like what was DLA Piper's take on that whole Hedera move? Like, was it, was this something that they were proud of, that they perceived as a win, or was this like, oh, here's Scott doing another one of his crazy ideas?
I think it was probably a mix to a certain extent, but I think the law firm always valued the ability to win more legal work by being able to put something on a pitch that made you look better than the next law firm, or
Okay.
more in line. And for me, it was part of what I was. I mean, I was a partner in a law firm, and as we know, as partners, one of your biggest jobs is to win more work. Because you have to oversee that work and deliver it. But really, lead generation, work winning is a huge part of life as the partner. And for me, I was always better able to do that if I really understood an industry or the technology or what was happening in that industry. Plus, it was always more interesting than just doing a law.
For
And why,
sure.
for me, more than just a lawyer, it was the combination that made me interesting. So I think the law firm really appreciated being able to say, look at what we've done. Look, and when you're winning, and then there was the rise of the Web3 industry, there are more and more credible players. And so the ability to win more pitches across the globe. So I was getting reach outs from all over the world. Hey, can we use those credentials? Can you tell me about this? Can you help me with my pitch? Because I'm pitching to, whether it was a crypto exchange or some of the bigger players that were rising up and now able to afford big law firms. So I think they liked that part of it for sure. And then, um, you know, and then, and then for me, the next step was tokenization. And I realized these crypto assets are good, but what are they really? I mean, to me, they're the oil that runs the machine. The machines being the big decentralized compute. What is the use case for these big machines? And for me, the use case for it is the digital transformation of law, the digital transformation of rights, things that we used to put in contracts now being put into smart contracts, and that looks like a token on a blockchain. And so that's where about 7 or 8 years ago, my journey really got into tokenization. I was like, hang on, this is law's transition moment as we digitize rights. And so I built the first tokenization business. It was called Toko, which I founded inside the law firm. We won also, I think I won Financial Times Innovative Lawyer of the Year, and we won that 2 or 3 years running. The law firm loved all of that. They loved look how innovative we are as a law firm, and it lined up with the firm's non-legal services business push. They'd created a thing called they called it the Radical Change Initiative. I think I went a bit too radical, so they changed it to Law and or Law Plus. But there was this support within the firm to allow me to take this forward. So we built this company within there. The problem, as I ran into, was regulatory. Eventually you can create these tokens, and the NFTs were taking off, and meme coins were getting going. So there was clearly interest in on-chain assets, but for
Yeah,
me,
you were too early.
way too early. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the problem was an NFT is fine because it's one asset, one digital representation, one owner, unregulated. But as soon as you want to do anything interesting, which is pooling
You
capital
want
and
to
sharing in
fractionalize.
something, you want to
Yeah.
fractionalize, which is the true value of doing this. You now tip across that very important barrier into securities or financial services regulation. And at that point in time, regulators weren't ready. So I spent years working with, the SFC in Hong Kong and MAS in Singapore, regulators, Canada, US, UK. And they could all see that this was the future of their industry, but it didn't mean they were ready for it or ready to let it go, or that the TradFi players were ready to allow them to evolve. And so when the opportunity came up in 2022, when VARA appeared out of the woodwork in Dubai, and I suddenly, there was this kind of tapped on the shoulder saying, we can see you're trying to do this. There aren't many senior partners in the world who's already built a tokenization engine. I don't suppose you can come and help build a new framework that does work here in Dubai. So that was the opportunity to really get heavily involved in the building of a regulatory framework that was completely, ground up. Unlike the battle that we still see happening with traditional financial regulators, who are trying to digitally evolve, which means they have to disrupt everything that they've already done, and all of their existing incumbent regulated businesses who are no doubt, saying stop that or slow down or wait till I'm ready or all these other things that are obviously happening. And so the way VARA created itself as a standalone regulator with no legacy, no existing market to disrupt, and more or less a blank sheet of paper. The job started with, let's go out and look what's out there in the world. What do we like? What do we don't like? What works? What doesn't? Now, against that backdrop, let's build one that does. And so
No,
that's what,
that's why the UAE is winning. I mean, like it's so clear to me, like that approach of go and tap you on the shoulder and say like you're somebody who's has significant experience in this on a professional level. I'm
yeah,
a regulator who wants to build something that actually makes sense and incentivizes people to come in and build here. How about you come and put your thinking cap on and figure out how we could do this in a smart way, as opposed
yeah,
to so many other regulators who are just like, you know, push this away as far as you can for as long as you can until we have no choice but to stop ignoring it, and then we'll do something that doesn't break necessarily immediately, and then maybe we'll
yeah,
fix it and make it actually work afterwards. So
yeah,
that was the first thing that struck me when I went to Dubai the first time and started just speaking to some people on the ground that were building there. How the regulator there is so forward thinking, so looking for how they could be accommodating and how they could build things that make sense, and not the other way around. So,
yeah.
uh, you know, that must have been a fantastic opportunity. So you ultimately geographically made the move from Hong Kong to Dubai to be part of that evolving VARA framework.
Yeah, I mean, I spent 2022 kind of helping build the framework from Hong Kong. So I was kind of ferrying backwards and forwards on that project. The opportunity then came with that existing business, Toko, to come and get it regulated under the framework we were building. And so that led to, with the support of VARA, who, helped sponsor my golden visa, and they were urging me to move over here. They're like, yeah, why don't you come and try and run a business? So that was the opportunity, if you like, to leave for law properly, having built the bridge fair way across the river before jumping, to actually move into Toko full time. Relocated, myself and the family to Dubai in January, February 2023. We managed to get that Toko business regulated. At that time, we got, I think, we're the third entity to get any sort of VARA license at the time, which was a broker dealer and exchange license. In 2023, which was super exciting. So we were ready to go. We were building a book of business. We were working with a number of clients, including VirtuZone. We were going to do a tokenized equity project for VirtuZone as one of our first issuances toward the end of 2023. And at that point in time, it became apparent that innovation within a law firm had reached its as far as it was going to go. And so we had to start again. And actually, our chief strategy officer, who's now my co-founder, Matt, had joined that business. And his observation early on was, we need to become a startup. And I didn't quite know what that meant. You sit in the relatively rarefied atmosphere of a global law firm. I didn't quite understand what that meant. I now do. And it's good and
Wait, from
bad.
the hustle perspective?
Just from the nimbleness.
Yeah.
I use this example because it's not too
Lean and
inflammatory,
mean.
but yeah, we tried to change the color on our website from the law firm's palette of blue, dark blue, grey, lighter grey, and white. We wanted to add a splash of orange. That went through a 4 to 5 month process with external branding consultants to decide which color of orange we're allowed to add to our website. And I use it as an example because it's true, but it also just says much about like the way we have to iterate and pivot and change within our environment now, which we can. Matt and I, when we started Tokinvest, and the first couple of times were big decisions, and we looked at each other and went, well, it's that way, obviously, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah. So we just do it, don't we? Yeah, we can just decide. I was like, oh, okay. That's terrifying, but isn't it good?
Committee.
No.
Yeah.
Well, we got to wait to next quarter's board meeting, and you can come and explain to people who don't really understand what it is you're trying to do and why. And so we became a startup.
Wait, so Tokinvest is
then
basically just you emerged out of Toko, kind of winded that down. Were you able to convert the license over?
I left. I left. It's still a thing somewhere doing something. I don't.
Oh wow. Okay.
But many of the team were exited. I resigned ultimately because I didn't see a path towards it becoming a functional business in the way that I built this thing not to win FT Innovative Lawyer Awards. I built this thing to change the future of finance. And when it became apparent that wasn't going to be a platform I could do that in, and I didn't know that created it in the law firm, it was owned by the law firm. So not mine to progress. Yeah. So I resigned. We obviously waited till some non-competes expired, and off we launched. And with the support of the regulator, we're fully licensed again. In fact, they introduced a new license last year, the issuance license. So this is the RWA license that came in June of last year. We have the only full market issuance license now in Dubai, so we're very much at the front of the pack. We had our first assets issued in late last year. We tokenized a racehorse, which was interesting. And I don't think you know this yet, Itzy, but as of Friday, we've just had our first real estate product approved from VARA. It's been a bit of a journey getting that approved. But
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's a big one.
Is it first heard here? Or?
This is first heard here. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
So, I won't go into much detail about the asset other than to say it's a global real estate product. We've designed. The first asset will be a multi-tenant UK building with 29 apartments, lovely heritage building conversion. I won't go into much more detail now, but the product that we've had now approved is obviously a reusable structure in large part in terms of being able to tokenize global real estate. And this for me was why Dubai. And I remember, when we won the mandate and we were asked, what do you guys want to do out of this? Are you going to come and do this long-standing project? For me, it was like, is Dubai really committed to creating a global financial center for on-chain capital formation, just like the traditional financial centers of, New York, London, Hong Kong,
And now you know the
Singapore,
answer.
they're the now I know the answer, and this is what they said. Yeah, that's what we want to do. And I said, yeah, I want to be part of that. I want to come and democratize access to finance. And this product, this real estate product, is retail accessible. We've now got a regulated financial product on chain, accessible to all investors, including retail, which is a sentence that's taken a lot of years to make true. And as per Friday's approval, we're about to bring first one of those to market.
Wow. Wow. Congratulations. That's huge. I mean,
Thank you.
what a big fan I am of RWAs generally and of Tokenvest. So, the
I
fact that
appreciate it.
some
Thank
of
you.
this is already coming into fruition is incredibly exciting. Um, Okay, so now let's touch a little bit more on Tokenvest. So I guess like you had already done a lot of the legwork with Toko, and so it was I guess shorter time frames for getting everything set up. But you could definitely, I mean, if you I'm looking now at like the Tokenvest website versus the Toko website, and you get that startup feel right away.
Yeah.
It looks amazing, and it's very much geared for the tech sector. What's it been like for you? Just like being a startup founder, I guess, kind of doing everything down and dirty. I know that when we spoke, you told me that you uh, hadn't expected to be doing all the legal work for yourself. So you're the founder and the general counsel and probably the CFO as well. And what's it like wearing all those hats and kind of just like juggling everything?
Yeah, it's been a great learning journey, but it's been hard. And I'm not going to hide from that. So, I mean, Matt and I, post Toko, I remember sitting on his couch. He'd been exited. I'd just resigned, sitting there thinking, well, we do want to do this, don't we? But it was a difficult time, to be honest, because he'd spent years trying to build this other thing. Had gone a long way toward getting there, and then been unable to see it through to actually operationalize it. So we looked at each other. I can remember the moment. Said, "Yeah, yeah, we're doing it." Shook hands, agreed a percentage split of equity, and then got to work on a deck. It was just time. And we had cause recently. I'm not going to explain why, but we've just gone through the kind of 2-year anniversary of some of the early decisions. I will. I'm not going to tell you what it was, but we had cause to have to go back and look at some of the early WhatsApps we were sending to each other around some of the early setup stuff. And I was like, wow, they were different problems back then to the ones we have now. Because you had to do everything. We had to raise capital.
Yeah.
We didn't have a brand. We asked some friend, a Russian who does a bit of design, to build us a logo. He built us one overnight. That'll do. Off and go. That done. Compare that to 5 months. Can we have a little bit of orange, please? So we just had to do everything. Hire a team. We have such a great team now. One of the benefits of being a startup is we couldn't afford to pay anyone much or all for a while. So the people who joined were great people who believed in the vision. They weren't people who wanted a wage. And that the difference between people who complain about being overpaid partners in law firms versus people who give up good, well-paying jobs to come and build the future of finance because they believe in it is just incredible. So that team of people that we've had on the journey and that is continuing to grow, we hired another couple in the last month. We're up to around about 18 or 20, I think now, on us
Wow.
full time, and there's the next few in pipeline. It's such a different environment. It's a very flat structure. It's a meritocracy. The person who knows the most about a topic gets to talk and gets listened to most. People can tell me I'm talking nonsense and to stop talking nonsense. There's no issue with any of that. So it's an extremely refreshing environment to work in, but it's also quite terrifying at times. When you're um, going through regulatory processes of unknown lengths. You mentioned, was it easier the second time? We were better the second time. We were so much better the second time. Like our submission documents, the robustness of our policies, our procedures. We had a better team, frankly, than we had at the old shop that we put together for this. A lot who had done, regulated, businesses in the UK, in the US, in Hong Kong. So we had a much better team, but it really wasn't that much quicker because VARA got much more robust. So their processes got more robust. The level of rigor required had gone up. So in the end, we were way better, but the rules were way tougher. And so it took around about the same time to get licensed again, um, which was good. And then we were about to get going, and they introduced a new license, so we had to go back and start again and get the issuance license last year. So yeah, it's been a journey. And then you get an issuance license, but now you need approval for each issuance. So you've then got to go through the product approval process. So it's not easy to bring a product to market in this space, and we're very proud of having achieved what is going to be the first proper on chain ARBA product for a global real estate product. That's a huge moment for us, and indeed, I think for the industry, because everyone talks about RWAs, but there's a notable lack of them still, with a few exceptions of TradFi products going on chain. They're really, the breakout moments are still ahead of us in terms of actually scaling this. And this is where it's really interesting what we're about to do. There's some I can't mention because they're not in the public domain, but some are. So we've signed with World Mobile for tokenized DePIN. So there's the ability to invest in decentralized physical node infrastructure that's bringing telecommunications connectivity to remote communities all around the world. And these are wonderful yield generating assets, but local communities can't afford the upfront cost. So it's a great, kind of social aspect around it, as well as a good investment product. We've signed with Maddox Art Galleries in the last couple of months. We're looking to tokenize really well-known, well-curated contemporary art pieces. Hopefully that'll be live within the next 6 to 8 weeks. We're just going through regulatory approval process on those products. We've got some private credit instruments that are really interesting, high-yielding private debt, private credit instruments. You would have seen the big silver bar with DMCC. This is the first tokenized trade flow warrant, which is the commodity product. That's in late stages. Hopefully they'll be coming to market the next couple of weeks even. So there's a really interesting mix of assets, including the racehorses. We've got a big presence at the Dubai Cup with the DRC in the next couple of weeks as we start to bring more of those tokenized racehorses so that people can participate in that industry in a way that they haven't been able to. So quite a lot of, and as we, the vision that Matt and I literally sat at the Earls Club when we first met many years ago, and literally on a napkin mapped out what the interface might look like, which is a kind of Amazon of RWAs. Where we're well on that vision is still very much squarely where we're aiming.
And what have been the biggest challenges? I know that like everybody talks about RWAs. The first and obvious challenge is getting licensed, right? Like you need a lot of money, time, and the right connections to be able to get there. So you've gotten there, you've overcome, that very, very significant hurdle for most people. And then the other thing is like, people talk about if you build it, they will come. Unfortunately, in some cases, after you've managed to build it at the great cost that you've done so, it's not always economically viable to make these products available to the masses. Like, what have
Yeah.
you found on the assets that you've managed to tokenize so far? Has the market been booming? Are people rushing to acquire these products, or have you seen challenges there as well?
Yeah, so we've only had 2 products so far launched on the platform. Both have sold out, or not. I wouldn't say immediately. The last one was 2 weeks ago, and it sold out in 34 minutes. So that was the next tokenized racehorse. So it's there, and there's already three times the amount of capital sitting on the platform waiting for the next racehorse, which I think might be next week.
Wow.
So in terms of user uptake, yeah, we are definitely seeing interest, but it's still early days. The reason I've partnered with Matt as co-founder is I'm all about how do we legally and compliantly put one of these things on chain. He's all about, but who's going to turn up and buy it? Who wants to market
Right.
make it? Who wants to trade it? Where's
He's
it
the
going to
business
go?
guy.
So he's a trader. He's a back end guy. So he's a prop trader, market maker. So for him, it's all about now designing product that is going to be inherently interesting to investors and inherently interesting to market makers and other participants in secondary market activity. So a lot of what we do is focus on not only can we do it, because I think we're more or less at the point now where we've convinced people, okay, you can tokenize anything, but now the question is why. And this has always been the question. So we've built strong distribution networks across the world with other regulated broker dealers, with a couple of tier 1 exchanges. and with wealth manager networks and other people who are able to take these regulated products down to an investor base. So that's and when we do the product design with an individual asset owner, it's all about who are we aiming at. Who's going to turn up and buy this? And if we can't answer that question pretty clearly with a bit of market testing in some cases, we just don't take that asset forward. Because to your point, there's no point spending all the time and effort proving you can tokenize something if no one wants to buy it and then trade it. So we spent a lot of time on that during the deal qualifying and then product development phase to make sure that it is going to satisfy those requirements. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it.
And is there going to be a layer to this that's more kind of like self-sufficient? Like I have an apartment in Barcelona that I want to tokenize. I could just kind of come on to the Tokinvest website and upload my asset, go through a verification process, and tokenize it, and kind of like not take the compliance risk, but take the financial risk on me.
No, I don't think so. Not under VARA. And the reason I say that is they changed the law last year so that issuance is now a licensed activity. So you can't create an RWA under VARA unless you're an issuer. We're currently the only regulated issuer.
So that's
But
the missile alert. Sorry.
You gotta go?
I need to. Sometime within the next 10 minutes, there might be a siren. So,
okay. So the answer is no. I don't see like the route to that is: do we want to buy your asset? So as the issuer start to look at acquiring assets, if we were interested in buying your apartment in Barcelona and putting it through our issuance, then yes. But you would have to convince us that that's a good asset to buy. And if you think about it, you're not actually just selling a piece of property at that point in time. What you're doing is you're creating a long-term financial product with counterparties. So the person who's trying to sell their Barcelona apartment through tokenization, they don't really want to end up being a counterparty to a regulated financial product where they've got long-term. And this is the pivot that we're seeing. A lot of even the real estate developers in this part of the world go, I just want to sell more property. I'm like, yeah, I know, but do you really want to be an issuer? Do you really have you thought about that? And they haven't. And this is where I think once you put real estate through tokenization, it starts to look more like a REIT or a fund product. It's just a new type of financial product. It isn't just,
which makes it less exciting.
No, I don't think so. I just think it means everybody's not going to be an issuer. And under the old VARA 1.0 rules, technically anyone could be an issuer. They've changed that and they've now said only regulated issuers because VARA wants oversight of the counterparties to the financial products. One of the legitimate criticisms I think of Web3 is there is no counterparty to the crypto assets. So if something goes wrong with your crypto asset, there's no one to ring up. There's no help desk. There's no one to sue. There's no, when the rug pull happens, there's no.
It's both a bug and a feature.
Correct. Exactly. So that isn't going to be the way for regulated products. And so, no, it's not going to be self-help. Drop your property onto a perform and hey, presto, you've raised capital as an issuer. It's going to have to be, do we as an issuer want to acquire that particular asset and turn it into a financial product? So the answer is sort of yes, but also sort of no.
But also no. Okay, very cool. So leave me with some kind of like parting hopium for anybody who's been looking at RWAs for a long time and wanting to see them kind of come into fruition, and now they can see that through Tokinvest. Final upbeat word, and
the moment has arrived. Like the hockey stick moment for RWAs, genuine access to regulated financial products for retail investors the world over is finally arriving. We're at the very pointy end of that. We are going to see institutional adoption of blockchain technology to bring efficiency to bear on existing finance, but that is in our side of the world. Our side of the world is how does everyone get to participate? It says on the back of our shirts, own what the 1% own, and that really means making these products available to retail investors, and that's what we've just proven with the first few, and that's where it's going to get super exciting. Friday was a big moment for us getting approval on a real estate product because it really does show VARA's intent to democratize access to financial products for assets that people want to own, like real estate, that can't own because either they can't afford a whole one, or the financial product versions of them, they're not rich enough to be able to buy because they're not an accredited investor. So for me, the breakthrough moment has now occurred, and we're going to start seeing a lot of interest in the space.
Okay, congratulations on Friday. And for anybody
Thanks,
who's
Jesse.
listening and wants to find out more about Tokinvest, or you want to invest, or you want to tokenize something, reach out to Scott. I'll share his details in the show notes, and you could also go to tokinvest.capital. It's TOKIE. Sorry, TOKIN. Oh, there's a siren. I gotta go. Scott, thanks so
See you,
much,
Jesse.
man.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.